Wonder Woman 1984 is once again directed by Patty Jenkins, and this movie stars Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Pedro Pascal, and Kristen Wiig. I was a big fan of the first film. I thought it was a total blast from start to finish. It really surprised me considering the past films that we got from DC leading up to that movie. So of course I was really excited to see what Patty Jenkins and the creative team would do with the sequel. And luckily this movie has been released simultaneously on HBO Max along with theaters, so a lot of people who otherwise probably wouldn't have been able to see it are now able to see it. This movie takes place decades after the original, and we follow Diana as she lives her life as Wonder Woman in the 1980s when she encounters two new foes. One of them being Barbara Minerva, a neglected employee who wishes to change her life completely, and Maxwell Lord, who comes across a gemstone that allows him to wish for anything he wants. And when things start to get out of control with this object, Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor, who has been recently resurrected, have to save the world before it's too late. I saw this movie a couple days ago. I watched it at home on HBO Max, but before I wanted to get a review out, I kind of wanted to let it sit for a little while because I realized there was a lot that I wanted to say about this movie. And there's so many things that I want to talk about here that I can't really get into unless I make this a spoiler review, so I'm gonna have to get into spoiler detail. If you have not seen Wonder Woman 1984, I suggest you go out and do that before you watch this video. I will say before I get into my in-depth thoughts that this movie was a massive letdown for me. I thought Wonder Woman 1984 had a ton of issues, and I was almost kind of shocked at how bad it was. And I take no pleasure in saying that, but this movie just did not do it for me. But in order to fully explain why I didn't like this movie, I am going to have to get into spoiler details. So if you have not seen this movie, consider yourself warned. The very first scene is definitely one of the best in the entire movie. We see young Diana on Themyscira in this Olympic-like contest. Really liked Hans Zimmer's music. It's probably one of the highlights of this film. And overall the sequence was just really fun. I thought it was directed with a lot of energy. But there's kind of this mini moral at the end of the scene where Diana cheats and she takes a shortcut to get to the end of the course. But Robin Wright's character comes in and stops her from winning the contest at the last second because she realized that she cheated. So she teaches Diana in this moment that cheating is wrong and that you can't do that. And I was waiting for this moment to come back in some way throughout the rest of the movie, but it never really did. Usually when you have a scene like this to open your movie as a flashback, it comes back in some way when a character has learned something and it reminds them of something that happened in their past. But there's nothing that even alludes to what happened in this opening scene. So I liked the sequence a lot and thought it was really fun, but it genuinely felt like it had nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Then we cut straight to 1984 and we get this great sequence with Wonder Woman in a mall where she stops this heist. I thought this scene was really fun. It had a lot of 80s campy vibes, and it was a great way to introduce Wonder Woman into this setting. And so I was totally on board. I was like, great, this is fun. We then get introduced to Kristen Wiig's character, Barbara, who is this clumsy, bumbling employee that no one really notices, and she wants to be popular and cool and liked. This was very creative. I've never seen anything like this in a movie before. Certainly not like anything I saw in Amazing Spider-Man 2, or Batman Returns, or Batman Forever. Yup. What an interesting, original idea. This felt like such an overused cliche for a villain character, even down to her appearance, her wearing glasses and everything. And I love Kristen Wiig. I think she's a fantastic actress. But the way they set up this character just felt like such a cop-out. Then we start learning more about this gemstone that can grant anyone whatever they wish for. And this really becomes what the movie is about. All of our main characters want something and they wish for it. Barbara wants to be more like Diana, and then she gets really strong, and guys start noticing her, and whenever she walks by, everyone's head turns and stuff. Diana wishes to bring Steve Trevor back, and Maxwell Lord wishes to be the gemstone itself. So whenever anybody touches him, they can wish for whatever they want, and then their wish is granted. But then we learn later in the film that whenever you wish for something on the stone, it also takes something away from you. So Diana starts losing her powers, Barbara loses her joy, and Max Lord starts losing his health. You can tell his body is deteriorating, he's having all these headaches and nosebleeds, and his son also wants to spend time with him, but he's kind of cast off to the side while Max Lord is trying to amass more power and granting all these people these wishes and stuff. And this thing got so messy and so convoluted. There are so many things about this stone that just don't make any sense. It's like they set up all these rules about how it's supposed to work, and then they just completely forgot about them. So the story of this movie didn't really focus on a conflict between two characters or anything like that. It was just, there's a stone, it can grant anyone anything they want, and we have to stop it from granting everyone everything they want. And I thought it was so lazy, and it was really hard to get invested in the story because the movie just focused on this really uninteresting plot device that I just didn't care about. I thought it was a really bad idea. But we definitely need to talk about Steve Trevor. I really like this character. I thought he was great in the first film. Probably one of Chris Pine's better performances. I thought he had some really great chemistry with Gal Gadot. But the way they included him in this film is so strange. And I'm still kind of wrapping my head around why they did it in the way that they did. He's brought back into 1984, even though he died decades before this, but he's not brought back as himself. He's brought back in the body of someone who lives near Diana. She runs into him at this party and obviously doesn't recognize him because he's just some random dude. But then in the movie he magically just turns into Chris Pine, which didn't make any sense to me, and then they embrace each other. But we later learned that the movie's just showing us Chris Pine and that everyone in the film isn't seeing what we're seeing, they're just seeing some random guy. So when he and Diana are doing all these things, it's just some random person. This was so incredibly weird, and it's just some random guy. So for all we know, this guy could have a wife and kids and a job that he's not showing up to, but we're supposed to believe that this guy was just ripped out of his normal life to be the host of Steve Trevor's soul. I don't understand why he couldn't just come back in his own body. There are plenty of crazier things that happen when people wish on this stone throughout the film, so that just didn't make any sense to me. There's also this ending where Diana and the guy whose body was being taken over by Steve Trevor, they run into each other after she renounced her wish. They kind of just say hi to each other and talk for a second and then go their separate ways. I didn't really know what to think of that ending. The whole thing surrounding Steve Trevor was just so off-putting. I will say I did like the scene with the invisible jet. I thought that was a really clever way to bring that classic Wonder Woman comics thing into a live-action movie. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so this video ended up being one of those that I had to record over the span of 2 days, so that's why the lighting is different now. There's a lot I want to say about this movie, clearly, and my camera, the battery ran out yesterday, so I had to stop filming, but now I'm going to finish it. One of the things that I really wanted to talk about with this movie was the pacing, because for the most part, it's pretty terrible. The first couple scenes were really fun and fast-paced, and I really liked where the movie was going, but then directly after that, it just starts moving so slowly. And one of the things I was really surprised by was the movie barely has any action sequences. And when it does have them, they're just kind of whatever. There's not really any action in this movie that I found that was exciting as the first movie. There's nothing like that trench sequence. There's this one that takes place on the road where Diana is kicking all these cars and jumping up in the air and stuff, and that one was kind of cool. But besides that, the action is very forgettable, and there's barely any of it. It's one thing if you have a superhero film with not a lot of action scenes, but the story is really investing. Spider-Man 2 is a great example of this, because a lot of that movie is just Peter Parker dealing with his personal life, and in that way the film feels more like a drama than a superhero film. But that movie focuses so much of its time into developing its characters, so when there are action sequences, you're really invested in what's going on. The problem with this movie is that the narrative didn't make any sense, and the storytelling is also really lazy, and on top of that, there's barely any action scenes in the whole movie. So there were long stretches of this movie that just kind of bored me. There's also a scene where Diana gets her powers back after she renounces her wish and she lets Steve Trevor go, like I mentioned earlier, and she learns how to fly again, and it's supposed to be this big emotional moment, but I didn't care. I genuinely felt nothing when I saw that. And it also didn't help that the song that played wasn't even Hans Zimmer's score for this movie. It was a song that was taken from movie trailers, I think, and I recognized it from stuff that I've seen before because it wasn't written for this movie. So that just kind of took me out of the film for a bit. I do want to talk about Cheetah, because this is probably one of the dumbest things in the entire movie. Barbara spends pretty much the first half of this movie wanting to be liked, wanting to be popular, wanting to be noticed by people. She basically just wants what Diana has, and so she wishes for that. But eventually, that becomes not good enough for her. So when she's with Max Lord again, later in the film, she literally says, I don't want to be like anyone. I want to be #1. I want to be an apex predator. And then she wishes to be a cheetah, I guess. I really don't understand how that motivation that she had in the entire first half of this movie to be popular and cool and liked and all that kind of stuff turned into her wanting to be a cat, because it definitely was not explained in a way that made sense, but okay. She looked terrible. The close-up shot that we got of her was almost embarrassing because it looked so bad. And then we had this big fight with her and Wonder Woman, who's now in this gold armor suit, and it was absolutely atrocious. It was basically shot in the dark, you couldn't see anything, and the CGI looked like it wasn't completely finished. That might have been why the scene was so dark, because they wanted to mask that. But this scene was just really bad, and it was a poorly directed sequence. There's one thing with this character that they kind of alluded to that I thought could have been a really interesting idea if they explored it more. And it was during that White House scene when Barbara and Diana have that fight and she kind of takes her out by the end of it, because now that Barbara wished to be more like Diana, she has her same kind of powers and the same level of strength as her. So in that way, Wonder Woman has kind of met her match physically, which could have been a really cool idea. It's kind of like the same concept that you have with Bane and Batman in The Dark Knight Rises. But they never really did anything with that. They explored it for like 2 minutes, and then Kristen Wiig turned into a cat in like the next scene. So they kind of just threw that out the window. So that was kind of the big finale moment that we had with Barbara's character. Let's take a look at what was going on with Max Lord during the finale. He wants to get really powerful and grant everyone in the world their own wish. But in order to do that, he needs to find a way to be able to touch everyone in the world. So he finds out that the president has this TV station network thing where he can communicate with people all over the world, if I'm remembering this correctly. So Max Lord uses this to broadcast himself all around the world, because it allows him to touch all these people, and the people to touch him through the particles that are coming out of these TVs. And then by doing this, he can allow all these people to have whatever they want. This movie officially has the logic of Batman and Robin. Nice. Then Wonder Woman gets a hold of Max Lord through the lasso of truth, and somehow this gets everyone to revoke all their wishes, and all the craziness stops and all the bad stuff goes away, and now everything's fine. Then we get a scene with Max Lord and his son where they hug and they kind of both realize what's important and that they love each other and that they want to spend time with each other, and it's this nice emotional moment for this character. But the thing that's weird about this scene is that this is the last time that we see Max Lord's character. So the movie doesn't really tell us if this guy faces any real consequences for almost destroying the entire world and everyone on it. And I already mentioned the ending with Diana talking to that guy who was the host of Steve Trevor's Soul. But there's actually an end credit scene where we get to see Linda Carter playing a character named Asteria, and she saves someone's life by holding up this pole. She says something like, "I've been doing this for a long time," which I didn't really have a problem with. I didn't watch the Wonder Woman show as a kid, so I didn't really have an emotional connection to that character or this scene. But yeah, I guess it was a nice little fan moment for people who like that actress and that character. All in all, this movie really disappointed me. I thought it was considerably worse than the first film, which I was a big fan of. It just had a really messy, convoluted narrative, some villain characters that I just couldn't get into. This is probably one of the worst paced superhero films that I've seen in a really long time. And I think the thing that let me down the most about this movie was that all I wanted was this campy, fun, 80s vibes comic book movie. And they gave me this story about greed and war and selfishness, and I just couldn't have fun with it. The stuff that was cheesy in this movie felt like it was unintentionally cheesy. Like, Kristen Wiig and Pedro Pascal's characters felt so ridiculous and over the top because the rest of the movie was trying to take itself seriously. And they didn't really commit to that fun, campy vibe all the way, and I wish they did, because it could have made this movie a lot more enjoyable. And the film also tries to have this cheesy moral about being careful what you wish for and being grateful for what you have and not focusing on what you don't have, which is a good message, and it's been explored in several things before. But in this movie, it just came off like it was forced, and I probably would have been okay with it had the narrative been compelling. The first Wonder Woman movie has a really cheesy message where there's like a voiceover from Diana at the end of that movie where she talks about how love is the greatest thing in the world and how it conquers all evil, which is really cheesy, but that movie had considerably better writing, so it worked. I have heard a lot of people saying that they enjoyed this movie, and if you're one of those people, I do not want to take that away from you. I'm really happy that you got something out of this movie, but there was just so much in this film that did not work for me. And I honestly don't know what happened. I still think Patty Jenkins is a really talented director, and her past films do show that. Gal Gadot is great as Wonder Woman, and most of the actors in this movie are doing the best job that they can with the material that they were given. But this script just definitely needed several more rewrites. I'm going to give Wonder Woman 1984 a 5 out of 10. It's definitely not some like monstrosity of a movie. It's not like Batman and Robin or anything. There's some stuff in this movie that I liked, but overall I just wish it was so much better than it was. So guys, those are my thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Also be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.